Would you eat dog or rat to survive?
Delicious. Absolutely delicious.
Yuck, but if this is the 1965 forgotten classic, a World War II prison camp movie, King Rat, let me tell you why I think you might like to watch this, why you might even love this movie, coming up next. So by 1965, you had a lot of very famous and well-known prison camp movies, escape from prison camp movies. This movie, King Rat, is so self-conscious about what it's about and how it's reacting to its predecessors. When you read the opening titles, the movie tells you right up front, this is not a movie about escape. This is a movie about survival. So this movie says, the prison camp you're going to see in the movie takes place on an island, Japanese prison camp of American and British soldiers, mostly British. They cannot escape because the jungle, if they flee into it, they will surely die. And so the movie is all about how these men just basically survive out the entire war. The movie is also about how a prison camp is extreme circumstance in which hierarchies invert. You've got a character played by George Segal. He's a corporal in the American military, but he's called the king, sort of like a monarch in this prison camp. Why? Because he's able to negotiate, to wheel and deal, and he makes himself rich in terms of this prison camp because of his ability to bargain and negotiate. And he's the only one in the movie who wears nice clothes, has a nice haircut, and doesn't look like he's dying. All the other actors in this movie, God bless them, they lost a lot of weight. And this is the sweatiest movie, one of the sweatiest movies in movie history. These actors in this movie look like they're suffering from famine, starvation, disease. But the king in this movie, and perhaps a play on Elvis Presley, who was obviously famous at this time, he is very survivable, and he's got a lot of stuff, the best stuff in the prison camp, and a lot of money. Well, the king has his minions, and even though he's a corporal, he's risen up in the ranks, so some of his minions are actually above him in terms of military hierarchy. They work for him, and they devise a scheme in which they want to breed rats and sell them in the prison camp, because it's hard to find food in this camp. The Japanese are not giving these men, as in real life, their actual supplies that they need, both food and medicine. So the king is going to breed rats and sell them, not as rats though, but as the delicacy mouse deer, and try to make a lot of money off this effort. The contrast to the king is a British officer named Gray, here played by Tom Courtenay, who wants to do things, as the summary says of this movie, by the book. He's a hardened man. He doesn't like people ripping off other people, but that happens in the camp all over the place. And one of the things that make this movie unique, in other prison camp movies, you tend to see cooperation and unity among the soldiers, trying to escape, trying to survive. Now, in Stalag 17 by Billy Wilder, you had the William Holden character, who was the radical individualist who tried to make money, the semi-capitalist of that movie, and the movie derides him for not being one part of the group, and two, being greedy and selfish as an individual. The thing in this movie, King Rat, is all of the men are tempted, including the British senior officers in the camp, to be greedy, selfish, individualistic in order to survive. The movie tries to say the realism of camp life, World War II, World War I, or wherever, is that survival of the individual is of the utmost high priority, and thus you need to join little gangs, you need to ally yourself with the king, for example, you need to steal from people. And so in this movie you'll see the British officers who run the camp, they are doing some side deals and some theft as well. So it's not just that the king is the capitalist in this movie who's out to be greedy and he's the only one who has a lot of good stuff. He actually enables some kind of economy in this movie, whereas the British system, and here Gray is a part of this, they're semi-socialist in that they distribute the food to the men, but they're taking some off the top, and they have unjust weights and measures, and they're starving some of the other soldiers. If you're in on the weights and measures scheme, measuring out grain and fish to the soldiers, you can take a little bit extra, and that's what happens in the movie. Thus, the prison camp is a mini world in which everybody is greedy, and it contrasts the king's semi-capitalism with the British officer's semi-socialist system. And I don't know who comes out on top, and they all look awful, and in fact, this movie says pretty much everybody is to blame for what happens in this camp, as far as starvation, men not getting enough food, and so on. Now, I described the scenery in this movie to you, but the plot is a character named Max, played wonderfully by Patrick O'Neill, great blonde hair, ends up as a British officer going with the king and being one of his dare I say, minions or workers. He actually allies himself with the king and ends up liking a lot of what he does. And that's in contrast with Gray, the Tom Courtenay character, who's always trying to catch these men as they're doing side deals and hustles with the Japanese. The only way to sell stuff and make money and get food and medicine is to do that sort of thing, but Gray wants to shut that down. The atmosphere of this movie is just tremendous. It's sweaty. The black and white looks so good. Get an HD version of this. I found it on Amazon. Gotta rent it. Someone needs to come out with the HD version of this on disc, Blu-ray, or 4K, but it just looks great. And without the color scheme in Great Escape, Bridge on the River Kwai, gives life to the jungle. But here that life is sucked out, and you don't notice. And I think that the richness of the men, their shadowy natures comes out in this movie because it's black and white. A really good choice. 1965, you don't have a lot of black and white movies. Still a viable option, but the movie obviously takes it here, so it was really good feature of this movie, I think. The movie is clearly about more than its historical moment. It's about different economic systems and the games we play in order to get ahead of other people. In fact, in order to just get stuff, period, we need food, we need medicine. How do we do that? The movie is all about that, and these systems. I don't think this is a strictly capitalist versus socialist movie. It does have those elements in there, but when you're talking about a prison camp, what these men do is quite extreme. So it's not, to me, like real life, where people are far more cooperative and obviously share something in real life because there's an abundance of goods. In the prison camp, not an abundance, in fact, barely anything at all. So, but the scenario still is reminiscent of different economic systems, and frankly, the king is unlikable. I don't appreciate him in this movie, but he actually produces from resources that he has to benefit the camp versus the British officer system of just weighing out food given to them by the Japanese. They don't really do anything with their stuff. In fact, they just steal out of the supply. So for that reason, I actually find the king, he's not as bad as you might think he is, even though I don't like him overall. He's definitely a greedy sort of person and should be, I think, feel shame for what he does in this movie. For all those reasons, King Rat is highly recommended as a forgotten classic. I hope it comes back, and I hope they put it on Blu-ray. What did you think of this movie? If you've seen it, let us know. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Have a great day.